Hi YouTube, welcome back to my channel, Taylor Talks Tales. Today I have a book review for you guys. It is on The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd-Jones. And just take a look at this awesome cover. I'm going to read the inside flap for you and then we're going to get right on into the review. Nothing stays buried forever. 17-year-old Rin cares about only two things, her family and her family's graveyard. And right now both are in dire straits. Since the death of their parents, Rin and her siblings have been scraping together a meager existence as gravediggers in the remote village of Colburn, which sits at the foot of a harsh and deadly mountain range that was once home to the Fae. The problem with being a gravedigger in Colburn, though, is that the dead don't always stay dead. The risen corpses are known as bone houses, and legend says that they're the result of an old curse. When Ellis, an apprentice mapmaker with a mysterious past, arrives in town, the bone houses attack with a new ferocity. What is it that draws them near? And more importantly, how can they be stopped for good? Together, Ellis and Rin embark on a journey that will take them into the heart of the mountains, where they will have to face both the curse and the deeply buried truths about themselves. Equal parts classic horror novel and original fairy tale, The Bone Houses will have you spellbound from the very first page. Alright, so I really enjoyed this book a lot. It is a standalone fantasy YA novel. It's classified as fantasy horror, and I would definitely say it is more fantasy than horror. The horror elements are more kind of the atmosphere, the concept of the bone houses, incorporating some grave digging elements, but really at its heart it's just a really neat historical YA fantasy. And it's a very refreshing book in this big sea of YA fantasy. Not only is it a standalone, but it incorporates a lot of mythology that isn't very common in the YA book world, and just like the feel of it's a little bit different, and I think that it brings something fresh to the YA market, because sometimes I think, even though I do love YA fantasy, I do think that sometimes some of the stories can feel very similar, and this is very distinctive. It really stands out on a couple different points. First of all, I really enjoyed the main characters. We have Rin and we have Ellis. Rin is really a compelling character because I connected with her really well because she's the oldest of several siblings. She has two younger siblings. I have three, and she's just wanting to do everything it takes to keep the business going and to keep her family taken care of. Her mother had died, her father ended up dying in a mining accident, and then she was, living with her uncle basically came to live with them, and he had a bunch of issues, gambling debts, addictions, you name it, and then he ends up disappearing, leaving behind tons of debt. And what's unfortunate with Rin's situation is that she runs the grave digging business in this, basically the cemetery, and normally business would be fine. However, with the bone houses rising up, people are no longer wanting to bury their dead. They want to cremate them instead. So she and her family are running on hard times, and there's this awful landlord who wants to take her house away, that kind of stuff. So she's just trying to get by and figuring out what to do. This introduces Ellis, who is this apprentice mapmaker who has quite a bit of money, and he's on this journey to discover some secrets in the mountains and map this entire area and figure out what's going on, kind of thing. He gets attacked one night, and Rin is the one to save him, and then they end up striking up a bargain where she will accompany him on this journey to figure out what's going on, see if they can stop these bone houses, because for the first part of the story, the bone houses they rise up and they stay in the forest, because this comes from a curse, like an old Fae curse. So rather than them being like the traditional zombies that you might expect them to be, they're more just like kind of shambling bones, and they work a little bit differently than your traditional zombie. And for a long time they were just staying in the woods, but then they start coming into town. What drives them away is iron, keeping with Fae myths, but this one guy in particular in town is taking away some of the iron, so there's like less and less of iron, so it's putting people in the town at risk. So pretty much the story follows Rin and Ellis, their journey into figuring out how to stop this. It's very much like a travel story, and that's really cool, I think, because it explores this area. The world building is really good. It's not like there's like tons and tons and tons of it, but it's enough where you can get immersed in the story and you can learn more about Welsh mythology and this situation and all of that. And there is a romance in this book. I don't think it ever completely takes over, which is nice, because I don't mind romance in books, but I don't usually like it when it becomes the main focus. In fact, the first like 85% of this is mainly the two of them getting to know each other and journeying on and going through various situations together. There's also, I really like, there's one character in this book that kind of steals the show, and I think it's the dead goat. There's a goat that was loyal to the family, ends up dying, comes back, but is like still very loyal, and just check this out for the dead goat. She's really cool. And I also think this is a really strong book because it represents someone who's disabled. Ellis was found as a young child with a broken collarbone. It was never properly set, and so he's taking medication for it. Basically, like, I think it's some bark or something, but it prevents him from doing a lot of stuff, which I think is very interesting too, because you usually see, you know, the tough male protagonist in the story just, you know, doing stuff, but he's actually, and he's not portrayed as being weak, he's more portrayed as having this chronic issue and chronic pain, which the author has also experienced. She mentions that in the story and like a couple of interviews and everything, so she really can bring that, and I think a lot of people who do have disabilities will be able to see themselves in this book, because, you know, it's not like he's the token like, oh, I'm overcoming this kind of thing, which I think some people in the disability community can be really sort of, you know, they just want to be treated like people, and that's how Ellis's case is. He does what he needs to do, he is limited in what he can do, but it doesn't hold him back. He has a lot of other characteristics, he's a well-rounded character, and I think that's important to have that representation. And Rin too, she's a very, you know, tough character. I connected with her right away. She's this axe-wielding, awesome character who, again, wants to be there for her family. She kind of reminded me a little bit of Katniss, but different at the same time. And I think the two of them really brought the story together, and the atmosphere and the way it's told. The writing's really good. It's never like purpley or flowery, but it's evocative. And I think for me, I'm giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's not quite a 5-star read for me. I think one, because I think I did want it to be a little creepier. And there were a couple elements of it that were a little predictable, I think. Like, there were some where I was just like, oh yeah, you know, I'm just chugging along, following this, and it's very good. I don't know what's going on. And other things where I'm like, okay, I could, you know, see that. So it wasn't perfect. It had a couple issues with it that I think, you know, I would have changed a couple of things up. Can't tell you without spoiling it. There were a couple things I would have changed, but overall I think it was a really, really refreshing read. I ended up liking this more than I thought I was going to, but in a different way. It's not, if you read this as it being, you know, a horror novel, you might be disappointed. But if you read it as like a dark YA fantasy, with some historical elements, with Welsh mythology, with Fae mythology, that has strong characters at its heart, and it's a standalone, which is always refreshing, because sometimes it can be difficult when you're, you know, just getting into a series and there's like 5 books ahead, and you're like, okay, I'm really gonna have to commit to this. You know, this is like 300 and something pages. It's pretty fast read. It's engaging. You care about what's going on, and the ending I think is pretty solid. So I definitely recommend checking this out. It would be good, I think, any time of year. If you want to save it for an October read when you want something creepy, it would be good. I also think that if you don't like horror but you still want something creepy and spooky and atmospheric, this would be a good choice to kind of bridge that gap between YA fantasy and horror, because it's, I would call it extremely horror light. Like, I would definitely classify it as like fantasy, historical fantasy, and even like a couple other things before like horror. It's sort of about the elements there. It just, I wouldn't classify it, I wouldn't put it in the horror genre per se. But it doesn't mean it's not good. I think it's great. I think it's a solid book. Definitely check it out. It has some good representations, good characters. It's engaging, and again, I love that goat. Steals the show. Very fun. Author obviously did her research. It's, you know, a great book to just pick up when you want to have something fun, and, you know, maybe you're in the mood for fairies or zombie-esque creatures. So yeah, check that out. If you've read it, please let me know what you think about it. If you have any comments, questions, please let me know. Please comment, rate, subscribe. Thank you so much. I also am super excited that I've hit over 100 subscribers now. Thank you so much. That was basically a really cool Christmas present for me to find out that I hit 100 on Christmas. So I will be planning a giveaway video at some point and sort of doing a 100 subscriber video, so stay tuned for that. I also have a winter horror reads recommendations video coming up and a few other fun things. So thank you so much for following me on this journey, and happy reading. Have a great day. Bye.